Hello, Rob Venn here today, and for this video for Media in the Online Age, we're going to look at how TV production has changed in the online age. This is following on from what we did last week on music, so it's going to cover some of the same topics. I'm going to be treating YouTube as a separate thing altogether. I'm going to be sending you some notes, some websites to read about YouTube for you to make notes on, but they'll be on the email along with the link to this video. So what are our syllabus links? So we've got to look at how online media developed, what's been the impact of the internet on media production, how has consumer behavior and audience response transformed by online media, and to what extent has convergence transformed the media. Remember, we must talk about the past, the present and the future. And it's a good idea as well to talk about your own experience of production and consumption of media. In the exam, to get a level 2, which is like a basic pass, you've got to be able to define the terms and theories. You've got to be able to offer some basic examples of theory, industry knowledge and debates. You've got to include the history of TV in the online age, especially to do with convergence. You've got to be able to look at future trends in online age TV production. You've got to give examples of your own production and consumption habits. Look at the pros and cons, arguments for and against, advantages and disadvantages. Thus get the basics. If you want to move into more your level 3, so you're talking about your BC grades, you've got to be able to name the theorists and be able to list dates on top of what you've got to do for level 2. And to get to level 4, I need in-depth analysis and discussion and debate, detailed case study examples. So today we're going to be looking at user-generated content, maker culture, Wikinomics, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, all those things we looked at last week, and how they've influenced TV in the online age, particularly production, distribution and exchange. But today we're going to be mainly looking at production, and we're going to look at video on demand. I'm going to start off with some basic analysis of how consumption and usage of the internet and stuff has changed before getting into some more detail. I will be sending you some detailed handouts about looking at the Ofcom communications market report for this year to look at television consumption in quite some detail. We'll look at that next week, but I'll send you the resources for it this week so you can do some prep. So just a little bit of basic background, just to put some things into context about ownership of devices. In the TV industry, they no longer really talk about television. They talk about screens, because the way in which we consume television content isn't just something that's done on TV anymore. So we're looking at a situation where 36% of us have got access to a smart television, so a TV with built-in internet and apps and all that kind of capability. A further 10% of us are using internet connected dongles like Google Chromecast or Amazon Fire Stick or Kodi or whatever boxes to make our dumb TVs smart. Another 44% are using games consoles to do the same thing. 29% of us got access to desktop computers, 64% have got access to laptops, 58% of us got tablets, 9% of us have smartwatches, and 76% of us have smartphones. So there's a key point here about the fact that increasingly more and more consumption of television is not actually being done on a television. We'll come to that in more detail when we look at consumption and distribution figures. This is from 2016. I couldn't find details for this year, but basically if we look at the uses and how people use the media on a general basis, as you can see, live TV viewing is dropping very slightly. It went down 3 percentage points, but 91% of people in the UK watch television at least once a week. However, if you look at things like paid on demand viewing, so Netflix, Amazon Prime, that kind of stuff, that went up by 8% to 26% of us are doing that. 25% of us are watching online video clips, So YouTube, Vimeo, etc. That's gone up by 5%. So it shows you that the online consumption of like TV type content is growing steadily, but still has a long way to go to reach the amount of people who are watching live television. There's essentially about a quarter of the number of people doing it, and there are big differences depending on the age of the person doing it. So if you're over 55, you're going to be doing most of your TV viewing on television, and most of it's going to be the main TV channels of BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. Younger people, particularly 16 to 25s, are increasingly watching more and more stuff online. If you look at the way people use the internet, as you can see, TV viewing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the list. 40% of people use it at least once a week to watch TV. 13% slightly less often. So, how is the TV industry being disrupted? 1 in 5 of all media communications time is spent multitasking. So even if we are watching television, quite a lot of the time we're going to be doing other things at the same time. Probably playing with our phones or our tablets, going on social media, instant messaging people, etc. 92% of adults engage in some kind of media multitasking. 19% of all media communications activity was multitasking. Only 9% if you're over 65, but 33% if you're 16 to 24. So we may be watching television or something on our devices, but we're paying less attention to it than we used to. Watching TV or films on a TV set was the most likely to be undertaken on its own, 83% of total viewing. The majority of text communication, 56%, was undertaken at the same time as doing other media activities like watching TV. In fact, 30% of all adults engaged in making a phone call while watching TV. So, as you can see, increasingly, television is becoming less of a primary media and more of a secondary one, as it's not absorbing our total attention like it used to. 2 good words here. Meshing, that's where simultaneous activities are related, i.e., you're watching TV and you're searching for information about what you're watching. Seeing somebody on a TV show going, oh, I know them, who are they? Going on IMDb to find out. 16% of multitasking is meshing. Stacking is where the simultaneous activities are not related. Like you're, Snapchatting your friends while you're watching television, but it's not about what you're watching. 84% of multitasking is stacking. Now, Rory Cellan-Jones, the BBC's technology reporter, back in 2013 said that, around the turn of the millennium, people assumed the internet was going to cause a major upheaval in the industry, with the channel, the schedule, and live broadcasting all doomed to extinction as consumers compiled their own menu of on-demand viewing. This has slightly started to happen in the last 5 years or so, but it's not happened anywhere near as rapidly as people thought it would. The vast majority of TV viewing still involves turning on a main TV set, sitting back and watching what's on the main channels. So we've got the difference between what we call lean forward and lean back technologies. A lean forward one is an interactive one that requires you to do something, like actually physically search for a TV show on Netflix to watch. Lean back is where you just literally lean back and passively consume something. Some TV channels are now offering content that's only available via websites or video on demand services. We call those Webisodes. This is the first thing we're mainly going to be looking at in terms of a change in the way in which TV is made. So if we look at the past of online television, we're looking back to the early part of the millennium. So the BBC was experimenting with these webisodes as early as 2003. It teamed up with the animation company Cosgrove Hall to do a Doctor Who 40th anniversary like animated episode. This is before Doctor Who got rebooted. And they distributed it purely on the Doctor Who website. It was called Scream of the Schalke. They then went a bit further. In 2010, they were experimenting with online-only television shows. So, online drama. So we're looking at things like The Cut and EastEnders E20, which is a youth spin-off of EastEnders. These were done as a way of targeting youth audiences who weren't necessarily watching as much mainstream television. The audience for EastEnders was getting increasingly older and older. So in order to entice younger people to watch it, they introduced this EastEnders E20, which concentrated purely on the younger characters. By 2012, more and more BBC TV programmes were having spin-offs. Like, Sherlock was producing online-only content. Doctor Who had shows like Pond Life. And they started producing web-only pilots to test the waters and see if it would work. Things like Feed Me Funny, which were only exclusive, they were exclusive online. You could only see them online, they weren't on TV. The fact that Pond Life was getting 5 million viewing requests proved the experiment was valid and it was something that was worth expanding on. Which brings us to the present. In the last couple of years, we're getting more and more exclusive iPlayer content. So in 2014, iPlayer started experimenting with things like Flea, My Jihad and Tag, which was content that was only to be shown on iPlayer. Again, this is content that was primarily aimed at the younger audiences, the 16 to 35s, I guess, because they figured they're the ones who are the most tech savvy and the ones who are most likely to be using the internet. Now we've reached the point where there's quite a lot of BBC iPlayer exclusive content. We've got things like Hypernormalization by Adam Curtis, we've got Simon Amstell's Carnage, we've got The Rack, which is a snooker drama by the looks of it. You've got British Muslim comedy. Those are just the top 4 programs that pop up when you access it. So there's all sorts of content available online, purely online. Then we've also, in the last couple of years, had the rise of the video on demand service. We'll talk about these more in detail when we look at distribution, or we'll look at things like BBC iPlayer and how that pioneered it all. And then we've got your pay services like Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these other ones popping up. But it's an important point that video on demand services are now reaching the point where they've gone from simply being a catalogue of other people's products to services that are making their own original material. In fact, Netflix is planning that by the end of this year they'll be spending $8 billion on original content, and they want their library to be 50% original content by the end of this year. So there'll be fewer and fewer like films on it, so it'll be less like going to your local Blockbusters was back in the day, and they'll become more and more like a traditional TV channel, more like Sky or HBO in America. Equally, Amazon Prime is spending $4.5 billion on content last year. Other companies are also starting to do the same thing. You've got people like Apple and even YouTube and Facebook pouring huge amounts of money into producing original video content. So you've got loads and loads of original content popping up on things like Netflix, some of which have become immensely popular. I mean, you think about shows like things like I can't remember what it's called now. Stranger Things, that's it. You've got things like House of Cards. You've got the Marvel shows they've been doing. Like we've got the new series of Jessica Jones starting this week. You've got things like Altered Carbon that came out a few weeks ago. Comedies like Master of None that have been really, really critically acclaimed. So they're covering all sorts of genres: documentaries, drama, comedy. Whether they'll actually start to go into more traditional television programs like chat shows and game shows is another thing, but at the moment they're producing some very, very high quality and very popular product. Amazon Prime is doing the same thing. I mean, its big coup, of course, is getting the Grand Tour, so poaching the Top Gear team. But they're also producing a lot of stuff that's been critically acclaimed, like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is winning a Golden Globe. We've had shows like Transparent, again, that's won Golden Globes and tons of awards. Man in the High Castle got lots of critical acclaim. So we're getting more and more content being produced by these companies now, and eventually they'll turn into more traditional TV channels rather than just catalogues of other people's product. And they're doing this by making the kind of challenging, adult and intelligent programming that companies like HBO and AMC have found success with. Netflix and Amazon Prime Instant Video are establishing themselves as a real threat to traditional TV broadcasters like HBO in America and Sky in the UK. Now, whether they're making any profit on these is another matter altogether, but Netflix, for example, their investors only care about subscriber growth. Original programming, which is exclusive content you can only get on Netflix, is attracting audiences in through the door and keeping them there. Netflix is setting quarterly notes to investors that excitement around new releases like Stranger Things and Narcos drove subscriber tailwinds. And its stock price in turn has a direct correlation to demands for original shows. So they begin to see this original content that's driving people to pick up Netflix, not catalogues of old movies and TV shows from other people. Now, Netflix don't release figures about whether their shows are successful or not. But when House of Cards came out in 2013, they did release some basic information. They did say it was the most watched show on their site at that time, and that people were binge watching the show. They also said that it gained them 3 million new subscribers, and that was almost enough to pay for the show on its own. So whilst they don't release that kind of information about how many people are watching it, that gives you some idea of why they're moving in that direction. We're now leading to a situation as well called cord cutting. Cord cutting is something that's happening in America increasingly. I don't think it's really that common in this country. But in America, people are dumping their expensive cable packages, cutting the cord, the cable cord, and they're getting their TV programs elsewhere. Now they're turning to video on demand services like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime and all these kind of things for their content, rather than having expensive video like cable TV or satellite TV packages. Doesn't seem to be the case in this country, where most people who've got things like Amazon Prime and Netflix have also got things like Sky and Virgin as well. Overwhelmingly, in fact. Whether subscriber rates, things like Skies and Virgins, will drop as time goes on, as more and more people going towards Netflix and Amazon, I don't know, but it's a potential future trend. So, where are things going? Well, one of the most dramatic things that's happened in the last couple of years was the fact that the BBC has scrapped BBC Three and moving its entire content onto iPlayer. They were told by the government they had to wipe £100 million off the BBC budget. And since BBC Three had an £85 million budget, they could make most of their savings in one fell swoop by moving the entire thing online. Obviously, why BBC Three and not one of the other channels? There were rumours they were going to cut BBC Four, but BBC Four wouldn't have saved them enough money. Plus, it's mainly watched by old people. The move to iPlayer would make sense for the target audience of BBC Three, because it was mainly watched by 16 to 34-year-olds. And according to Lord Tony Hall, who was the Director General of the BBC, he said increasingly it's thought the youth audience is switching to accessing online content. They're watching in their bedrooms and they're watching on tablet devices. So it made sense to move BBC Three online rather than one of the other channels, because it's aiming at a younger and conceivably more tech-savvy audience. So it was addressing not just the fact they need to save money, but also the way that people were changing their viewing habits. Recent reports have shown that linear TV viewing in BBC Three's 16 to 34 target audience has fallen 27% over the last 5 years, and that time spent online has tripled to 9 hours a day, and that over 90% of 16 to 34-year-olds have a smartphone and at least one social media account. What it's basically saying by linear TV is watching live television. So young people are watching considerably less live TV on things like BBC One and BBC Two. They're doing it more and more online. They're using iPlayer. So why not move the entire BBC Three online? It makes sense. So we're getting content on BBC Three online, which is purely online and is not going to make it onto mainstream TV. As you can see, largely aimed at younger audiences. But carrying on with what we did with last lesson when we were looking at music, what about user-generated content? Now, as I said, YouTube is going to be one of the big things here. We're going to look at how YouTubers are driving this user-generated content revolution. But I'm going to keep that as a separate thing, not in this video. I'm going to send you some links of articles to go and have a look at. So today we're just going to look at general user-generated content. Just to remind you of some of the theory, Henry Jenkins and convergence culture is the one to go for here. He talked about participatory culture. He said the web provides a powerful new distribution channel for amateur cultural production. He says that amateurs have been making home movies for decades, but now these movies are going public. You can distribute them easily online using things like YouTube. Now, he was talking back in 2008, but this kind of stuff's become more and more common because of the cheap availability of camcorders, non-linear digital editing packages, and let's face it, the fact you can make an entire thing on your phone nowadays and it will look very good, in theory. So let's have a look at a case study here. We're going to look at Webseries. So a series of Webisodes, in other words. It's a series of video episodes produced for and distributed by the internet that are never meant for television, but they're television-like content. According to David E. Emwalt, in 2012, the upcoming generation of media consumers is far less likely to watch broadcast or cable TV than their parents were, especially the tech-savvy ones. So the idea of making content specifically for young audiences and specifically for the internet has become increasingly common. So you're allowing independent producers like Freddie Wong or Felicia Day or Roseanne Lang to be able to produce their own content, to distribute it online, to become sort of like mini industries in and of themselves. This started back in 2006 with a thing called Lonely Girl 15, which looked like an ordinary video blog, a vlog, which, in which a young 15-year-old girl talked about her life. But as it went on, it increasingly became clear that it was actually a drama, sort of like a futuristic science fiction thing. This made people quite angry, but it was an interesting development, and there was interesting things about how we make assumptions about online content and about everyone thought it was one thing and then it turned out to be another. But we're starting to see the production of online-only content, some of which has very high-quality production values. A good example of a case study would be Video Game High School. It's a little bit old nowadays. The first series was in 2012, but it ran for a couple of series. I think it was 3 series. So it's still just about slots into our 5-year time frame. But it was a crowd-funded online sci-fi sitcom, I guess. It was an action comedy internet series made by Rocket Jump Studios. There were 3 seasons of it, and it was hugely popular. The 9 episodes of season 1, last time I checked, had been watched by 40.5 million times. Probably gone up since then. So, we're talking a pretty successful product. It was crowdfunded through Kickstarter. Originally, they set out to raise $75,000. That goal was reached in only 24 hours. They ended up raising, just over $250,000 from 5,661 backers. They also got $100,000 worth of free product placement from companies like Razer, who make game peripherals like keyboards and mouses and stuff, and Monster Energy drinks. The first series ended up costing $636,000, which isn't bad. And when you watch it, go and check out an episode or so. It's got very high production values that are easily comparable with a typical television show in terms of its special effects and stuff. It doesn't look that cheap. It may not have the professional writing of a TV series. I mean, it's as sitcoms go, it's watchable. I mean, it's not considerably worse than something like Big Bang Theory, but it's quite impressive. Now, why a web series? And I called it Freddie Wong, who created this. He said, "We strongly believe the foundations for the future of digitally distributed content will be laid by web series. We don't see a web series as a stepping stone to get a feature film product or a TV deal. A good web series is an end unto itself. The web series format is uncharted territory and we want to explore it." That's an interesting point. They're not just saying, oh, this is going to be our calling card to get a film deal or a TV deal. They're saying, no, we're making web content as web content. Increasingly, if the audience are watching more and more of their content online, then TV and film start to look like yesterday's news. That maybe the internet is the future and that's the way in which all media will go one day. Don't know, maybe not. They seem to think so. I mean, they did pretty well when you consider the fact that something like video game high school cost, $600,000, whereas you look at something like The Walking Dead can cost for an hour and a half of content, or 44 minutes of content for Walking Dead. You're looking at knocking on $7 million. That's not unusual for a high-end television show nowadays. Something like Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead or something, even something like Doctor Who can be looking at that kind of money. Whereas something like Halo Forward Unto Dawn, which was a little web series 90 minutes long that was made to promote the video game, cost $7.5 million plus. Cheap in comparison to a a film, but still pretty expensive. We're also seeing more and more web series being created that are becoming pretty popular. A good example would be High Maintenance, which is about a marijuana delivery service. There's a comedy series online created by Ben Sinclair and Katja Blichfeld. Debuted on Vimeo, who funded the first season back in 2012, and eventually became a television series. So it got aired on HBO in 2016, and then they commissioned a second series. So the first series was web only until it got picked up by HBO, and then they commissioned a second series. It's also been aired on Sky Atlantic over here. And there are many of these web series out there. What I would like you to go and do is go and find some examples for me. So in class, we're going to go over examples of web series. See if you can find as much information about them as you can. How much do they cost? How many people are watching them? How much are they made for? What's the cost of them? Have they got any spin-offs? Have they sort of like kickstarted anyone's career? Stuff like that. So go and find me some examples. As I said, I'm also going to send you some articles about YouTube and how YouTube has changed its content over the years, and how YouTube has changed the concept of television or television-like products over the years. So you want to read that up before we come into class on Wednesday. Right, if you've got any questions, you know how to contact me, and I'll see you next time.